So today, what would you say your strength is? Like, what is your unique selling proposition to partners?
What is my personal superhero power? Is leadership. I am all about culture. I'm a culture creator. I created an environment. It's really, first and foremost is how you show up is everything. Attitude is everything. But your job as a teammate, right? It's not an individual sport. It's a team sport. You have to protect the heartbeat. And by doing that, and I really generally mean this, if you're coming in with negativity or drama or toxicity, which is like quicksand, right? Then you have to take yourself out of the environment or we'll take you out. Meaning, like, if you show up with a negative attitude for the day, you can't work that day.
Well, you're going to skunk everybody around.
That's right. So I'm very protective and very kind of black. This is black and white. It's a non-negotiable.
This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, chef owner of Kembara and Tia Carmen, Chef Angelo Sosa. My man, Angelo, are you feeling unstoppable today?
Eric, that was like I was at the Warriors game and I was actually playing and somebody announced me. Wow. Could you do that again?
I like to crank it up in the beginning. It's meant to be motivational. It's meant to be uplifting. And it's fun to kind of come into it strong.
Well, we're two East Coasters, right? Here on the West Coast. Right?
Yeah. I think it's a good icebreaker too.
100%. Yeah. We're talking about something we love.
Yes. Yeah, man. I can't wait to get into it too. And before we do dive into who you are and how you got to where you are today, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Okay, the mantra or the success quote. It's going to tie into I'm just going to do like a couple sentences of a quick story. Well, first of all, the quote is, all things are possible if you believe.
All things are possible if you believe.
Yeah.
Why does that resonate?
Yeah, 100%. So I grew up in a small little country town in Connecticut called Durham. We're known for our fair. Have you heard of the Durham Fair?
Absolutely.
Hello.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's 7 kids in my family. All my siblings, or the majority of my siblings, went to Ivy League school, and I wanted to become a chef. Okay. So essentially, I was the black sheep of the family. I was the only one that believed in my vision, even though people told me that I couldn't do it, wouldn't do it, not possible. I didn't have the intellect or whatever that might be. The list goes on and on and on. And I just believed in myself, and my Tia Carmen believed in me, and set that ignited that fire for me at a very early age. So 9 years old, I knew exactly what I wanted to be.
What happened? What was the triggering moment that made you say, I want to do this?
Oh, okay. Powerful. So I grew up in a very militant home. So chores were not taken lightly, right? So on the weekends, first of all, I'm half Dominican.
Okay.
Half Italian, right? Spicy combination.
Yeah,
my father was very militant.
Anything half Italian is always good in my book.
And I love pasta.
Yeah.
I love pizza, actually.
Nice.
So my father, chores were taken very seriously. And my weekends consisted of getting up super early in the morning, 5 a.m. Let's go upstairs to the garden. Let's, till the garden, weed the garden, water the garden, feed the compost, like all day. And this was my weekends, right? So he was grooming us to be, when I say us, my siblings, to be like, we had to listen to classical music. We had to play chess on the weekends, like really trying to sculpt us, right?
Right. Well, it's the American dream to leave your kids better off than you were, right? And when I think your father came from, you were first generation, right?
Dominican Republic.
Yeah. So like coming from the Dominican, I don't know what the Dominican was like. How old is your dad?
In his 80s.
In his 80s. So going back to like the 40s, right? That's crazy. Like, what was Dominican Republic like in the 40s? So to come to America in the 60s, was that how old he was when he came to America? Like, how old was he?
My Lord, you're going back. I want to say probably late 20s.
Late 20s?
Yeah, late 20s.
That's how old he was?
Oh my Lord, you're asking me to do math.
I'm just thinking like, it's crazy to think about like where was America in the 60s and 70s? It was probably the best it had ever been in terms of like opportunity. There was more middle class Americans than ever before in the 1960s. There was more opportunity in this country than ever before
100%.
During that period, that post-World War period.
100%.
So if you come from second world or third world, I don't know how you would classify Dominican. Was it second?
Third world.
Third world. You come to America during that time where there's no more juxtaposition possible. Because it's literally the best place to exist in America during the 1960s. It's arguable today, right? But like Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see why he would push you guys so hard.
I mean, I love that perspective, and I think it's really kind of like, like a relay race, right? Like passing the baton, passing the legacy, passing the opportunity, right? And hey, I didn't know that, right? Being a 9-year-old boy, but on the flip side, my siblings and I in the family at 9 years old would, drive in our big old blue Oldsmobile, right? And I'll never forget in the winter how cold those, fake leather seats were, right? And we'd pull up to my Tia Carmen's home in Queens, New York.
And this is your aunt.
That is correct. Right. Tia, aunt, yep. And, we would pull up. My brothers and sisters would slam the car door open, run inside, up on the porch, and run into this white house, go past the living room, past the kitchen to go play outside with all my nieces and our cousins, right? And then I would just always be the last one. And I could just, as I stepped onto the porch, the wooden porch, I could just smell the aromas of the guisado. She would always boil bay leaf vinegar, and the bay leaf aroma is just totally magical. So I would go watch her for hours and watch her cook. And when it was time to eat, it was so precious and magical, because I grew up in a very, I'll just say it this way, very, very hard home, like really hard. Not, we had to raise our hands when it was time to talk, right? Or
how many brothers and sisters do you have?
5 girls, 2 boys, right? And I'm the youngest. 100% not spoiled. I had to work for everything. And get this, of course, I had to wear all their clothes, right?
Right. Yeah.
All the hand-me-downs, so they never fitted. So that's probably why I like style as well. But when it was time to eat, just imagine my machismo father with this kind of stern look on his face on one end, and my Tia Carmen, very vivacious and loving and just loud but loving, right? And she wouldn't even touch her food until she heard laughter, joy, or is just dead silent, right? Which it never really was, but her food had frequency. It had love. So coming from this volatile home, like in that moment, I was like looking at her sitting on the floor next to her, just like looking up at her with these brown curly hair, brown eyes, just a very docile, innocent boy. And I just looked at her and I'm like, if this is what love is, I'm going to do this the rest of my life. So
that's cool.
It was like a lightning bolt hit me that day.
But you said up to this point, at least I know from my research that up to this point, you weren't really, like, food wasn't like your friend at this point. You associated food with a lot of the chores and the negative things from the discipline that you're getting from your dad. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's very fair.
Yeah.
And what's kind of interesting out of all of this is my father's a psychiatrist.
Interesting.
Right? And, I remember this story. It's really fascinating. I'm going to tell you something. And it hit me last month, and I told my wife this for the first time in my 49 years of life, right? Or 40 years later, right? There was a time that, and it was in the summer in Connecticut, right? And like the New England summers, right? Really gorgeous. It was around 5 o'clock, so it was starting to cool down. And I made this cabbage salad. It was cabbage and capers and celery salad that my Tia would always make. And I remember, we had, fresh grilled corn. We had this cabbage, and I don't remember what the proteins were, but my dad ate the cabbage. And I won't tell you what he did. I'll leave out that part. But he essentially threw it at me.
Really?
And he basically screamed and was so irate that it was under-seasoned.
Oh, really?
And I tied this.
How old were you?
Around 9.
Damn.
And prior to, more of that experience with Tia Carmen, right? And I told my wife, I'm like, now I understand why I season so aggressively. Like, I'm an aggressive seasoner. So if you're going to taste salt, I bring it right to that edge where it's almost like, is this, or if it's sour, it's like, is this, right? So that's my style. And it's just really interesting how it came out like 49 years later or 40 years later.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool how our life experiences mold us to like those little degrees, like those little attentions to detail, like the little things. It's interesting. So okay, typically I have my guests kind of share the big picture, but we got right into it with your quote.
Yeah,
so like really, give me the big picture of where you are today. What are you responsible for? What are your assets today?
Oh, okay. We're in San Diego.
Yes.
I'm just kidding.
Oh, literally, we're in San Diego.
So yeah, I've been. Oh my God, I can't wait to get into this. But I've I'm very blessed. Currently, we have 2 beautiful restaurants in Phoenix, Arizona. We partnered with the JW Marriott there in northern Phoenix, and we have a beautiful Asian street food style restaurant called Kembara. Okay. The word it means in itself is to seek and discover. So really, Kembara is my journey, my travels of discovering and seeking for stories, for beauty, for art, for flavors, right?
Yep.
And then we have Tia Carmen on the flip side, same hotel, literally probably about 100 feet away.
Okay.
Right? So we have Kembara on one side, so Asian food. And when you walk into the space, it looks like the streets of Asia. It feels like the streets of Asia.
Cool.
With this beautiful open kitchen, and you could hear the wok cookery. We make all of our noodles in-house, the curries, the sambals, the curry powders for our cow soy. And then on Tia Carmen, it's named after my Tia, is a contemporary Southwestern restaurant, right? And the beauty of Tia Carmen is we unveil the Southwest. Like, what's that new perspective? Like, before we started, you talked about your favorite state being Arizona, or one of them. Okay?
Right.
I won't put you in a little predicament with that declarative statement. But there's so many microclimates, right, in Arizona. So we want to unveil the ingredients as well as the stories of the farmers.
So where was your Tia Carmen from?
Dominican Republic.
Dominican. So why Southwest restaurant?
It's more of a namesake. It's it's when you close your eyes as a guest, I want people to feel her passion and her frequency of that love, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's where you are today. You have 2 more restaurants opening, correct?
Yes, I do.
And what are the names of those restaurants?
Yeah, sure. So
talk about that?
Really excited. So we are launching another Tia Carmen. This is going to both of the restaurants are in Indian Wells. We partnered with the Hyatt, which is converting to a Grand Hyatt. So that's going to be the renovation is stunning. The rooms are stunning. The property's stunning, and we're really looking to go for it. We, in fact, we're going to push the envelopes for this one, for this Tia Carmen, because we want to focus on California produce as well.
Okay.
Right. And that those micro farmers and those relationships. So we spent some time at the Santa Monica Farmers Market and really a lot of time sourcing the ingredients. But here we really want to elevate the valley, right? The valley in itself, the Coachella Valley, has a lot going on, and we really feel that, again, we want to unveil the valley and have like all eyes on the valley, right?
Nice.
And then the other concept is carmucha. Carmucha is, in fact, was my Tia's nickname.
Oh, cool.
Right? So the whole perspective of carmucha is, I made this story up, so bear with me. She's in her mid-20s, right? And she's in Dominican Republic, where she was born and raised. And she goes to Italy for the first time. And she has pasta pomodoro and the rolling hills of Tuscany overlooking, the cypress trees and the poppy seeds, right? And then she's off to her, then she actually, as the sun is setting, she's on a little postcard of the Tuscan hills. She's writing to her family back in the Republic, like, "Hey, Tia Evangelina," that's her sister. You won't believe what I'm eating now. There's succulent noodles. They use this word al dente, but of course, when I get home, I'm going to make it for you. But I'm going to add, of course, a little Dominican flair to it. So, essentially, carmucha is my Tia's travels through the world. So it's global tapas from my Tia's eyes.
Interesting. And I knew that you had Tia Carmen, the concept, and I remember in my reading that you had something going on where she is traveling. And what I'm interested to get into, I don't want to get into it yet. It sounds like your business model is in partnership with the Marriott. Like, you have a relationship there, and that they are opening hotels, and you're like their partner in the restaurant side of the hotel. So I'm interested in how you're leveraging that relationship and what we need to know about that approach.
Sure.
But it'd be cool because now you have a concept that has legs. So I'm like envisioning your aunt traveling and all these different like restaurants that she'd be staying at the Marriott Hotel, right? And the restaurant in that hotel is what she would be eating if she was visiting that part of wherever the hotel is being built.
That's such an interesting perspective that I've actually never thought about.
I just felt like, okay.
And it's really powerful. And for clarity, so the restaurants in Phoenix are with the Marriott. The ones in California and Indian Wells are going to be with the Hyatt. So it's like, that's really kind of that's really powerful because I have this another mantra. And the mantra is this, right? Is like, what a slide projector is, right?
Yeah.
Right? And imagine each slide and then you go to the next slide.
Yep.
I'm practicing this every single day of just seeing what that slide is. And
That's
then
cool.
Not bringing the past nor the future, just being present. Because think about, like, I don't know if you're a sports guy, think about the Jordans, the Kobes of the world, the Steph Currys. Like, when they're down 20 points and there's 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, do you think they're sitting there moping? No, they're present to every single, that's when they get ignited, right? And on fire, but like they're not thinking about they're not thinking about anything else other than that moment, right? So that's really what I'm practicing now. I'm not sure how I got here, but bring me back.
Yeah, well, I was just talking about because of this vision you have for say the name of the restaurant, Kombucha.
Yeah.
A lot of your inspiration for food is your Tia Carmen, right? And I know that the vision for kombucha. I'm not going to say this right. you make it sound so much.
Kombucha.
Thank you very much. The vision for kombucha is to, like, it's what she would be eating in that area, right? And I feel like because that's what I was saying with, like, this model, like, you have a scalable, like, the brand is Tia Carmen, and her through her lens, and I think it speaks to, like, especially like more young women traveling solo than ever before, right? And, like, so it's like a feminine brand that if somebody, like a female staying at a hotel, it would appeal to her. I don't know. I think it works for that business model.
Yeah, but what's interesting, Eric, is this, and my business model is the heartbeat. Right. So when you talk about Tia Carmen, for me, even, we're in training right now in Indian Wells. We're opening in a couple weeks, right? A soft opening, right? Like, I talk about protecting the heartbeat. So for me, I'm 49 years old, and one thing I've learned in life, right? Like, my story arc was, like, even when I was on Top Chef in my 30s, like, I was like a chameleon. And what I mean by that is I feel like I just said what other people wanted me to hear, and I was essentially didn't even know who I was as a person, right? And I wasn't able to, nor put the time towards all those, like, childhood, like, limiting belief systems. And now it's just like, I just say my piece and I do my piece because I'm not hurting anybody. But the reality is the heart, the vulnerability of those stories of the past, because everybody has a Tia, right? Their own version of a Tia, right? So for me, I want to bring that story to life. So that has that heartbeat, that transformative heartbeat, because at the end of the day, hospitality, a drink, a food, all it is energy.
Right.
It's energy that's admitted, and it's either received or given away, right?
Well, it's literally beyond the hospitality, the warmth, the generosity, that energy that you're describing. Food is literally energy, sustenance. We're providing life. We're taking something that was alive, whether it was a plant or an animal. We're transferring that life to you in a prepared way, right? And this is going to give you life. So, like, it's such an intimate thing that we do, and I don't think the industry gets the from growing the food to delivering the food and feeding the food, bringing the food to the person. Like, there's so much intimacy in that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, and I love that word. For me, it's not about more. It's not about being cool. It's not about being sexy. It's about doing something. And I know you heard this word, being genuine, like just being real to me, So I want people to see me through the restaurants and that heartbeat. And in fact, you talk about bigger picture. What do I have going on? Talking about that heartbeat is I have, I'm launching a product line.
Oh, cool.
Okay, I've actually never mentioned this publicly,
Nice.
so I'll give you the scoop. I won't tell you what it is, but talking about that lineage is one of my partners is, I used to work with him 15 years ago in New York City, and I haven't spoken to him in over 12 years or maybe 13 years, and I just picked up the phone and said, hey, just out of the blue, hey, how are you doing? But I was watching him on social media, and his voice and his authenticity and calmness and energy that he's, like, the deposit that he's putting out to the world was so powerful that I wanted him in my life. So we've merged forces, and we're gonna launch a product together, right?
Okay.
not even after talking for such a long period of time, but like, this is the place that I'm in. I want to expand and thrive and be abundant, but it's not just about me. It's about people that are aligned with me upon the vision of how they see the life.
And you mentioned when you're younger, like you're a chameleon. You don't have identity yet. You don't have self-awareness as a young person. Many people don't. That's something that comes later in life as your frontal lobe develops. For many people, not until like their mid to late 20s. They start to really understand who they are and to get that identity. So I think what you described, that idea of being a chameleon, I think is the most important thing for all people, especially young people, is fitting in. You don't want to juxtapose. You don't want to march to your own beat when you're a young person. You want to be like everybody else, because God forbid I don't fit in as a young person, right? It's the most important thing for young people to feel like they're a part of. So I think that's almost like we learn how to coexist with others, and then as we get older and more independent, we start to really try to better understand like, how are we separate? How are we different than the pack? And then you lean into it, right? Because you can't until you truly know who you are. But anyway, I digress.
Not at all.
Let's go back to when you started living intentionally to get to where you are today.
Sure.
What up, unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's be profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master of restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
So I want to go back to where it makes sense to start sharing your like professional journey, right? But before we really drill down, like, when did you open your first solo restaurant? Like, what was the year?
Oh, wow.
Approximately.
My Lord.
How old were you when you opened your first
was
restaurant?
about 12 years ago.
12 years ago.
Yeah, so I'm
49. 12?
So that's 30.
2012.
Yes.
Right?
Seems about right.
So 2012, that's when you owned your first restaurant.
Yes.
When did you start working in the industry?
Oh, my God. I've been cooking since I was 18 years old.
18 years old. So in 2012, if you're 12 years ago, you were 37 when you opened your first restaurant?
That is correct.
37 years old. You're 18. So basically 18 years almost, right? 18 plus 18 is 36.
18 plus 18 is 36.
So what were you doing for those 18 years from when you knew you wanted to work in this your entire life? So like, you knew at 9 that you were passionate about food. When did you know that you wanted to own a restaurant? When did that happen?
Own a restaurant. Okay. Well, first and foremost, right? So I even before I went to culinary school, right, I worked for a chef that was taking his certified master chef's exam. So I was around 18 years old at this point, and I was working with him about 6 days a week, even on my off days of practicing for this master chef's exam. So I felt like a year with him, like when I went to the Culinary Institute of America, right? Okay. I felt like, I mean, it grew into a love to an obsession. Like, I was obsessed, right? Like, I just remember feeling such a sense of frustration wearing those like white shirts and in the black pants, and we weren't even the chef's uniforms. Like, I felt such a frustration. Like, I just wanted, it was like a rookie cop. Like, I just wanted to, like, maybe metaphorically use my gun. I wanted to get in the kitchen, use my knives. I really didn't care about the theoreticals and the history of, I just wanted to cook. So so it's really funny. The Culinary Institute of America, if you've ever been, right, they have these restaurants, right, that the students work, right? So typically you finish at the last part of before graduating. But I was so persistent every single day. I would just stand by the door and ask the chef if I could just work there or wash dishes, do whatever, anything. And after a while, I think after about a month of just seeing me every single day, because I just didn't give up, he was just like, I've just had enough of you. Just go do something. Here's a uniform. Just go do something. So I just did something. So that's when it was like, okay, I want to be one of the best. Like I either want to be one of the best or work with the best. So then I was a very, very intentional. I worked for, prior to going to New York City, I worked for a French chef called Christian Bertrand. He was a French master chef, the former chef of Lutèce. And after him, I worked for a chef named Jean-Georges. Yep. Jean-Georges in New York City. At that time, it was a 3 Michelin star restaurant. And that was the first time my eyes were just like, it's as if they just opened for the first time. And that obsession grew to a deeper obsession. So kind of going back, that volatile and hostile environment of growing up with my father in the abusive environment, when I got into these 3 Michelin star chefs and everybody was just screaming at me, I'm like, okay.
I'm conditioned.
Okay. This doesn't faze me. So I just skyrocketed up the ladder. It just did not faze me.
So I am curious, before we dive into the professional career, as somebody who just wanted to get into restaurants and cook, why did you go to culinary school?
That's a very thought-provoking question.
Right?
Thank
you, I should say. As a man, yeah, I agree. It was a great question.
So going back to that chef that I spoke about, that's training for the Certified Master Chef's exam, he was all about education, right? So it was very normalized for me. So I'm going to get you here. Don't fall out of your seat. I actually went to 2 culinary schools.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went to one locally in Connecticut. Is Manchester.
Le Cordon Bleu?
No, it's like Manchester Community College.
I know Rhode Island was around the corner.
Yeah, not too far away.
Yeah.
They have the Johnson & Wales, right?
That's what I meant to say, Johnson & Wales.
And then I went to the CIA.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, knowing what you know now, do you think that's the path that people should take to get into culinary?
That's a great question as well. So this is my thoughts, and I'm not trying to take the easy way out. I believe in this. I believe there should, for people to succeed in life, so I think every person is different, okay? And everybody learns differently, right? There's theoretical learners, there's visual learners, and I think you need to know how you learn, okay? Right. So I think you need to understand yourself and how you learn. That being said, I think individuals need, if this was, me giving advice, structure, discipline, and love are the three tiers that you need in order to succeed, right? And humility through that love. Right. So I think it depends on the individual. So if school suits you best, and do that. If not, going to stage in New York City. Right. But what I will say is this: think about who you want to model and go work for them at whatever cost. So when I worked at Jean-Georges, right, when he hired me that day, right, I lived in Connecticut. I got on the Metro North. I went into Stamford, Connecticut. I got off the train. I walked past my apartment. I walked right into the bank, and I said, I'd like to take out a $13,000 loan to go work at Jean-Georges.
I would like to take out a loan to go get a job.
Yeah. So that was my investment.
So the investment was basically rent? Is that what you're going to be spending the money for?
Yeah, so that I could commit to without feeling all this stress. Yeah. And it's really funny, and I don't talk about this often. 2 weeks into working at Jean-Georges, getting paid $6 and I think it was like 75 cents an hour. Okay.
In New York City.
In New York City.
In 1990.
Oh, Lord, you're asking me a lot of dates. I want to say 1999, around there. 98, 99.
Yeah.
So I went to Chef Jean-Georges. I asked him, Chef, do you have a second? 2 weeks after I started. Pulled him into the dry storage area. I said, Chef, I want you to know that this is the biggest sacrifice of my life, and I promise you I'll make it count. And on top of that, I'm going to be the best cook that's ever worked for you. My next paycheck, I think I got paid like $14 an hour, and I think just being daring and letting him see my conviction, I think, and then on top of that, for about over a year, traveling for, 4.5 hours every single day from Connecticut to New York City.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Wait, so you were starting at 6 and he gave you an additional basically $7 or something like that? So he just gave you a raise because he knew how much of a risk you were taking?
100%.
That's cool.
100%.
That's real cool. And just your commitment to it and your all in, burn the ships mentality, right? I think is very powerful. We can learn from that. So you said something. You said what you need to be successful was discipline, love, and something else.
Humility.
So did you get that coming up through the restaurant industry? Discipline, love, and humility?
Well, I was in full transparency, I was, so each one of my mentors, I learned something from, right? So there's just a derivative of a mantra that I've learned from. Christian Bertrand was humility, right? Jean-Georges was simplicity is excellence, right?
Alan was the next one?
Alain Ducasse.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there I learned a lot about opulence, but really source and search for the naked truth of the ingredient.
Was it Alan or Elaine?
Alain Ducasse.
Alain Ducasse. And tell me more.
I mean, Alain is, Monsieur Ducasse is, I spent time with him in Monaco, right? And, there'd be times we would go to the market at like 5 a.m. or even earlier at times, right? And go to the port at Nice, and many times in Italy as well, because it's about a 45-minute drive. And the fishermen would catch their fish, and it literally would still be going through rigor mortis. So it's like never compromise on the quality. The quality will dictate not only the experience, but the story, right? Because we're just conduits.
So this is where you learn the power of just quality of ingredients. Never sacrificing quality. You learn simplicity from Jean-Georges, and then Christian
Bertrand taught me just. I mean, that man was a very hard worker, but humility, really. Like, we're in service too, right? And we're in hospitality. And I think it's really interesting from my experience, just observing teams, watching teams, even consulting with teams, just how we speak to each other. Like, is that really done in a hospitable way? So I believe, I'm not going to get all biblical and spiritual with you, but I think the essence of hospitality too is like Jesus washing the disciples' feet. We're in service too, right?
Yeah, and it's really like the servant leaders that do the best, that go the furthest. And we're like, what do you need from me to be successful? My job is to serve you, not the other way around. To make sure my team can be successful.
That's right.
So what was the intentionality of working for these different people? Like, what was steering your ship at this time? Why would you leave one restaurant to go work with another restaurant?
Well, this was off air. We had a conversation. And we were talking about, or you brought it up, that the most powerful thing is a recommendation or a referral.
Right.
It's like, and I use the analogy of like a baton in a relay race, right? Because that essence, that nectar is really the source, right? And you're also nurtured as long as you're put in the right hands, right? So when I worked for Christian Bertrand for almost 4 years, then he's like, I know a chef. He's like, well, where do you want to go work in the world?
So 4 years you were with Christian?
Yes.
Wow.
So Christian was like, where do you want to work? He's like, you pick anywhere in the world and I'll call the chef. He's like, but if I can make a recommendation or influence you, there's a chef in New York City that, this is a year after Jean-Georges opened, that is really, really doing something special. His name is Jean-Georges. I was like, okay. I didn't even know how to pronounce that word, right? So, so I went to New York City and I met Chef, and I'd never been in a subway before, so my eyes are just open. And just looking at all the cultures and smelling all the aromas. And then when I finally got to the Jean-Georges restaurant on the bottom of the Trump International Hotel, I see Chef there, and it was almost like I was in heaven. Right? I was in heaven, and I saw him reading the New York Times and having his daily orange juice. And I never heard somebody speak French before. And he's like, bonjour? And I'm like, okay, I think that means hello. Hello, chef. So we started chatting. And then he's like, let me show you the kitchen. And we walked into the kitchen, this beautiful kitchen, right? Just polished, ever so clean, almost like a brand new car. And he says, he almost whispers it into my ear. Feel this. He grabs the oven door. He puts my hand onto it. It's almost like I'm weightlifting on the bar, right? I feel the door. It's so silky. And then he removes his hands, and the weight of it just dropped. It was that weight. I couldn't even tell you where I was. I think I went into this divine place. Anything thereafter was just a blur to me. It was a blur to me.
How long were you there?
In total, it was 4 years.
4 years of blurriness.
Yeah. It was the most magical. I will admit, it's a reoccurring dream. I'm not exaggerating. Every single day of my life, I think about that man, or I think about working there.
Blurry
I miss
simplicity.
I miss it dearly.
What do you miss the most?
it's the environment that's created there is a competitive collaboration.
What does that look like?
It's the cooks wanting to be better than you and you wanting to be better than them, and it's just a cycle of like they're feeding you and you're feeding them, and they're better one day and you're better the next day, and it's just like a ladder. You just constantly are, you're climbing.
What was the energy between these people like, though? So if it was a collaborative competition is what you said. So is it like about lifting each other up, or is it about beating people?
I would say more lifting each other up.
Okay.
That's what I mean. And I really think those environments create the best results.
And how did Jean-Georges create that environment of getting people to want to come together to beat each other, but in a supportive way?
Yeah, I wouldn't say beat each other in regards to one up.
Yeah, but like try to challenge, like, hey, like you, like it's a gamification. Yeah. There's a certain level of creating a gamifying the work where like, oh, you did that, well, like, I want to be just as good or better. And in me beating you, now you feel like you want to rise to my level. Yeah. So it's like anything, like a sport. You go, you practice, you get better. I get better, you get better.
That's right.
So like, how do you create a culture where people give an F to try to get better?
Yeah. I think first and foremost is the standards and the care for the ingredients it is literally uncompromising and unwavering. There's no acceptability otherwise. So I think that strictness and protecting that essence. I'll also say this: he did this a lot, in the time it was really hard to deal with. He pushed you beyond your belief systems. He almost, I would even use the word, shattered your belief systems. And I'll give you an example. Pretty much every Monday or every other Monday, we would change the lunch menu, right? And we do a prefix menu, right? He would sit at the bar, and lunch service, I believe, if my memory serves me correct, started around 11:30, if not, I think 11:30, right? He would sit at the bar, holding the pack of recipes, reading the New York Times, and drinking his orange juice. And he would just wait and wait, and then till he could start seeing like all the chefs like hungry dogs, like waiting and he would wait till like 9:30, 9:45. You have to understand there's probably 2 to 3 dishes per station, so you could imagine, at a 3 Michelin star restaurant,
right?
10 o'clock rolls around. Now we're like savoring, like we need these recipes because it's. And then he'd wait a little bit longer. He would always wait as long as he can till he knew. Then he would just 10:15 or whatever time just drop the recipes. And we would just scramble. But it taught you to just be so present and so intentional with your moves. It was almost like a professional athlete. At that elite level, you have to be so intentional with every single, like a gymnast or an ice skater, right? Or a tennis player. That moment, you could just miss something.
So what do you think he was doing in that time? Was he literally working on the recipes, or did he have them? And what do you think was the intentionality behind this?
The intent, he had the recipes. They were already typed up and written up. The intentionality, I believe, and I think about a lot is it's a constant. It's like Angelo 2.0. Okay, just when I feel like I've never been at this level, then it's Angelo 2.5, and then it's Angelo 3.0, and then it's Angelo 3.5, and then it's just goes. So when you think that, just constantly shattering that concept of comfortability, and it made us so intentional, so like precise, right? We had to become precise.
What was the expression you used, that he constantly shattered what was possible? What was the term you used, or when you started talking about what?
Yeah, he shattered our belief systems. He constantly shattered, and it's, to this day, it's just something that I carry with me, and I do it in my own way. Like, we'll be in service. This might sound like really crazy, and I'll just give an ingredient to the chefs, and I'll be like, I need a dish in 20 minutes.
Right. When I hear about the shattering the belief system, I think about the 5-minute mile. Okay. Somebody ran a 5-minute mile, and it was believed to be impossible. Yeah. Right. Somebody like I can't remember when it was or who it was, but this individual, this guy did the 5-minute mile. Then all of a sudden, like, this is a record that was believed to be impossible. Yeah. Then one person does it, and then within months, another person does it. And then it's like, once you know it's possible, then all of a sudden, all these people started breaking the 5-minute mile because it was no longer impossible.
That goes back to my initial mantra of how we started this podcast. all things are possible if you believe.
Exactly.
Right.
So why is it so important to shatter belief systems?
Yeah, because I think I believe belief systems are human constraints. It's we also talked about like knowing thyself, right? Like I feel like we're born, and good and bad is like that's our parents are they're doing the best that they can, but there's also a lineage of history of what they know, right? So I believe that it's not until our later part of life that we start to know thyself, and some people have the joy to know themselves earlier and have that conviction and purpose, right? But like I personally believe, and I'm in the place of where there are no limitations, and I'm not going to look at anything limiting, right? And I need to surround myself with people that believe that, right? And trust me as I trust them, right? So for me, that's very important. When I say protect the heartbeat, that's actually one of the heartbeats, is to be daring and to annihilate limiting beliefs.
Right. And it's like, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. That's another quote that comes up, and like, it's our job to set the vision, the possibilities, what is possible, what we believe we can do together. That's the vision, right? And that's, I think, what leaders do, is they shatter your previous beliefs of what's possible. Yeah. And I think I love what he was doing with like holding on to the recipes till the very last minute, because what he's doing, he's conditioning you. Like we did it, we got everything ready. I don't know. He's really pushing the envelope on like the time you have to execute something, because maybe in the future, like, you might not have all morning. Maybe something will happen where you're forced to act fast. So if you create that environment where you're limited with the amount of time and resources to execute something, when the time does come where you're going to be limited because maybe somebody was late showing up, or like, if you're always operating at that, the edge of like what's possible, it keeps you sharp.
Yeah. It also extrapolates like time management.
Yeah.
And it also too, it really creates a team atmosphere really brilliantly, because what happens in those moments, so that hour and 15 minutes before service, your station's already set, but like, how do, if we're cooking in the kitchen, hey, Eric, you take care of the onions, the brunoise of the onions, garlic, yada, 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 I'm going to do this. So you all, you work as a community towards that common goal, but you're also pushing at a rate that it's fast. You're making decisions in split seconds.
Yeah, I love this. So 8 years, 2 chefs. Now you're 26 years old in the timeline.
You're really good with this timing thing.
The timeline is my center line, man. That's how I stay on track with the conversation.
I actually left Jean Georges after 2 years.
I thought you said you were there 4 years.
Yep, on and off in total.
Okay.
In total.
So 4 years with Christian, 2 years with Jean Georges.
4 years total. So I worked for him for 2 years. Then I left. I went to Asia.
Okay.
Right, and just as I thought, and Jean Georges taught me about lime leaf, lemongrass, ginger, and galanga. Like I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to Asia now, and I know everything. And then when I went to Asia, I knew absolutely nothing. Right. So I traveled throughout Asia, learned, worked.
Where was your favorite place in Asia?
Well, at this time, I was mainly in Vietnam and Thailand. I was in Hong Kong as well. I mean, I adore Hong Kong, and I staged in a Cantonese-style kitchen, not knowing the language, but I just persevered, and it's just something that, again, I felt very uncomfortable, but I had blinders on. I think that's a gift in itself too. Is like in those environments, I was just so locked in. There was nothing that could rattle me, not even knowing the language, right? But I observed and I watched and I listened, right?
So how long were you in Asia?
Yeah, about 3 months.
3 months?
Yeah.
So you did 2 years with Jean Georges. You traveled to Asia for 3 months.
That's right.
Did you go to all those places in 3 months?
I did. Wow. I was in Hong Kong, Vietnam. Spent time in Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh, and then I was in Bangkok mainly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you came back, where did you end up?
So this is when I left Jean Georges at that point in time, but I opened a little restaurant in the West Village.
Oh, you opened your first restaurant?
Actually, now you're catching me in my words. I was a partner. Yeah, I had profit sharings.
Okay.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
So you're like in your mid-20s at this point?
I think I was 28 at this point
28.
in time.
Okay, cool. Before we move away from Asia, like, how do you think getting that experience helped shape who you were going forward?
Going to Asia. It removed every preconceived notion. I really just, again, I believe in just currently where I'm at in my life. It just just be present to what you're experiencing, because in that moment, you know, if you're focused on something else that's not relevant to now, you just might be missing out on the gift. Right. So I'm searching for the gift, and the gift could be a conversation, a gift could be a dish, a gift could be an experience. Right. So I'm looking for the gift so that I could gift others with that gift.
Right. I mean, when I was in Southeast Asia, like what really stuck out to me was the level of community, seeing how these people don't really have a lot, but what they do have is each other, and like they choose to give their energy to each other, to go to the markets, you know, where we have markets around here, and I feel like there's just not a lot of participation. It's like they choose to have that community-centric lifestyle. I wonder if you picked up on that. Or...
Yeah, well, I'll articulate it slightly different, but we're saying the same thing. Is I believe that they're protecting the culture. They're protecting tradition. I feel like if I'm to be straight with you, like I love tradition. Like in this country, like I feel like we're just losing tradition.
Well, there's so much different tradition too.
Yeah,
you know, like it's a melting pot of different cultures.
Sure.
I agree with that though.
Like I'll give you an example. For me, growing up, you know, I grew up in Durham, Connecticut, and in the winter we had harsh winters in New England. You know this, right? And you had probably harsher winters in New Hampshire, right? But we'd go. My siblings would be all over the world going to school, and they would fly in the night before, and it was our tradition that Christmas Eve, you know, at like, you know, what seemed to me like 1 a.m., but I was young, so it was probably like 9 p.m. Right. We would go cut down a tree in the forest, you know, like that tradition.
Right. Rituals.
You know, so I see that, and that's really one of the reasons why I adore Asian culture. Is I remember when I was first time in Thailand, I walked into a room. I think I was in a hotel, and everybody just started bowing, and I got on my knees because I didn't want them to bow under me. Like I felt like so, I don't know, seen, and it felt so vulnerable. But I wanted to know that I saw them too. I think that's just the beauty of travel.
Yeah, it's really important to get out there and experience. And I think especially as a young chef too, to get that experience. And I think it's one of the reasons why I suggest people maybe not go to college, because it's not cheap to travel, you know. But if you are a good cook and you have that talent, you can literally go anywhere in the world as long as you have no liabilities holding you back. So to get that experience while you're young, to really let that shape you. So you come back, you're 28 years old, you open your first restaurant you're a partner in. How long were you with this project?
Oh my gosh. Wow. I was there, I want to say under a year. So I'm going to paint a little, you want a little color here?
Well, yeah, this is the first time you have equity or you're getting profit sharing your partners.
So I left Jean-Georges. This was a big deal, and this was like really emotional for me first and foremost.
Why was it emotional?
Because I just, I love Chef as a chef, but I love him as a man and as a human being. And it, you know, I tend to, in kind of looking back at my life, I tend to, all those figures, Christian Bertrand, Alain Ducasse, Jean-Georges, and I'm not just saying because they're famous chefs, but they were very much father figures to me. And I went out of my way to make more of an effort than chef-cook relationship, right? I made more of an effort to let them know that they were that to me, right? So getting back, so the name of the restaurant was called Yum Cha.
Okay.
You're digging up a little bit of a grave, which is good, and I love talking about these things. So I left Jean-Georges. It was Yum Cha was in the West Village on Bedford and Downing Street, corner little space. It was stunning. A small little 55-seat restaurant, and the kitchen in itself was like Joe Robuchon's Le Tellier in Paris. Okay, it was all black, and you sit at this sushi bar style counter. There is a dining room, but it's a small dining room, but mainly to see like the theatrics of the chefs. You sit at this sushi bar style counter and you watch the chefs. And we were all we had these black suit pants with pinstripes, black jackets, and we all had a toque, okay? And we had a wok, so it was a modern Chinese, and we had dishes like, you know, jellyfish with green tea that we'd pour tableside. We had this whole tea program from this master tea sommelier from Beijing. Like, it was really stunning. Long story short, okay, here's a bullet. So the restaurant was really extremely successful. Like, there was just lines out the door. Like, it was really hard ticket to get, right? You know, I had Alain Ducasse seat there. I had Jean-Georges. I had Danielle. I had Paul Bocuse seat there. Like, it was like a big craze during this time. One day, so this is very interesting and very vulnerable for me to share, but I'll share because that's all I'm about. Is one day, like, this is where ego comes into play, right? My partner at the time, and I had a small little shares, equity shares, like I think it was like 5 or 10%. And I noticed during meetings, my partner would always just shut down all my ideas. And the business was like thriving financially, like thriving from the P&L perspective. It was crushing it. And I noticed, he kept on like planting the seed. I want to turn this place into a lounge. And I'm like thinking like, he's just, just speaking off. He's just making this up. Like it's nothing serious. So one day we had a meeting. He's like, yeah, we want to turn this restaurant into a lounge. And I think he was just getting so jealous of the praise, which is really
from the food. He was jealous of the praise.
Yeah, which is just kind of strange because he had majority share of the restaurant. And he ended up, I would say we got into an argument. He was like, I'm going to turn this into a lounge. I'm like, why would you possibly do that? So I was like advocating for all of us and all the lives. And because the team worked, we were so connected. Like when I say family, I mean like we were like,
Why are you breaking something that's
it was
proven
beautiful,
concept, right?
It was like Jordan's last dance. Like it was like kind of like that type of team, right? Like we just knew the ins and outs of each other. We did whatever, like on and off the court. We were just there for each other. And I was just so dumbfounded. And long story short is he lost his temper on me. He threatened my life. And he, I guess you could say, fired me, right? So that day I was just like, it was one of those moments. It was like a catastrophe, and my heart was just broken. And I went downstairs. Like I still remember, New York City is a small space. I went down into the basement. My team is prepping, and I'm like, I won't say the gentleman's name out of respect.
Yeah.
So and so let me go, and my voice was like cracking. Yeah. And I was so humiliated. Right. I was so I gave my life. I didn't take a day off, and 3 months straight, I was just 7 days a week.
And you were the chef partner.
Yeah.
What was your title?
Yeah.
And did you buy in that 5%?
No, it was just all sweat equity.
So sweat equity.
Yeah,
okay.
A lot of sweat.
Yeah. Did you own 10% equity in the business when you left? Did they have to pay you out your...
No, it got worse. Share? It got worse after me leaving the basement. So, I'll get to that answer. So as soon as I told my team, I just got my stuff and I walked down. I don't know if you've been in New York City on a hot summer's day.
Yeah, it's stinky.
And like you ever see, in the summer's day, like on the road, it looks like there's a haze from heat. Yeah. Like I look behind me and I see this haze, and I was just like, it was all happening at once, and I couldn't make sense of anything. It was like this catastrophe that had happened, and I look back and I see this wave of people, and it's my staff, both front and back of the house, following me.
They all left with you.
The whole restaurant left with me.
Wow.
What up, unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master on restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
Well, my question was, what happened to the restaurant after they decided to become a lounge?
Well, so what happened to the restaurant is the restaurant in time closed.
How long
unfortunately.
did it take?
I don't recall. But it was really, I come back in that time. I was very naive. I was a very naive human being, and I wasn't business centric. And
this is 20 years ago.
Yeah, I was not business oriented, and what was hurtful at the time was the owner at that time. He went out to the New York Post and told his side of the story. And I come from like a very an environment and a childhood of just like it's just yes and no, and like. If you have nothing nice to say, just keep it to yourself, right? So there was no point in, I didn't go out and publicly make an announcement or anything like that. So I'm not sure if I regret that or not. It happened the way that it happened, but, just one takeaway is that jealousy, in the ego is you need ego, but you also, to know love, you need to experience pain, and to experience pain, you need to know love, have love, right? So ego is important, but not when it's that dictatorial, right?
Right. In that moment when you turned around, you saw this wave of people coming behind you. How'd that make you feel?
It's just like it was like a magnetic love for them,
yeah,
and that they were willing to compromise their families' lives because that's how they fed their families. So I also looked at it from a perspective of taking responsibility for them. Mm-hmm. So, I found them all jobs, and that was something I, was essentially didn't have a job, right? But yeah. I care, I'm all in with people, right? And I'm not surface level. I like going deep, and I know your family, your kids, that's how deep I like to get with people.
Knowing what you know now about business, being business savvy, 20 years of experience since this moment, what would you have done differently?
In that specific experience,
in that relationship, in that partnership,
maybe
yourself.
Communicated differently, communicated in a way that I understood what he was saying, and tried to understand him, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe and I don't really recall, and I'm just saying from a place of responsibility, just looked at my actions and what I could have done differently, right? Because what we had created was something, and I rarely use it. It was just magic.
What could you have done differently?
We never had time to talk about it. So
talk about what's
after the experience, what occurred with this gentleman.
So like in this moment of like rage and anger, you decided to talk, and you never really got to talk about. Oh wait, what do you mean by we never got to talk about it?
Meaning, like calm-headed, right? Yeah. And being reflective and being compassionate.
If you walked away, maybe took a couple breaths and like calmed down and like reapproached the conversation, maybe it would have ended differently. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I remember. I wanted this to work, and regardless that he was saying, I was like the pillow to it. You know, I embraced the words. I think his anger was turned into rage, and he wasn't able to hear. But I think when he said that he wanted to threaten my life, I just knew that was, like that. That's the line right there.
So you're 28, 29 years old-ish around this time. The next restaurant you owned, what you said you were 37.
Yeah, I went on a little, I don't know if it's a sabbatical, but I consulted around the world. Yeah.
10-year period of what happened between 2009.
Yeah. I'll be straight with you, Eric. I lost my mojo. I had no.
After this experience?
After Yum Cha closed, I lost my confidence. I blame myself. And again, I'm going back, however many years ago. So,
20 years.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
You'll never forget a date or
You're 48 now?
49.
49.
Yeah,
so approximately 20 years ago.
Yeah. So I just beat myself down. I just beat myself down. So I lost I just lost it. I lost my mojo.
What was your lowest low during this period?
Just self-doubt.
Yeah.
Everything I did, even creating, like I couldn't even create a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like it was too complex for me. I was so insecure. I just
burnt out, like emotionally and just like creatively burnt out.
Yeah. But this is where the story of Alain Ducasse comes into play.
Okay.
And I think it's actually a sweet story. Do we have time for it?
Yeah, please.
Okay, great. So in my it's actually not the lowest of lows. It's my third lowest of lows. And now I could rate them.
Nice.
So in this moment of, right, so just kind of jumping back to Yum Cha, right? So one day, actually the day that I took my what was officially going to be my day off, which was a Sunday, and maybe it was a July or August day, I go home and I'm in my white pants and white tank tops and it's like soccer shoes on, and I get a call, right? So I'm attempting to take a day off. Ducasse is here. So Yum Cha was on the lower Bedford and Downing, and I lived on 28th Street. I couldn't find a cab, so I sprinted.
Oh my gosh!
Sprinted. It took me like 30 minutes. I sprinted I'm like a cheetah. So I show up and I'm like dripping in sweat in my tank top, right. All I needed was a cigarette, for the full look, right. And I see Ducasse there sitting in the corner. I asked him to stall him. Okay. So I put my chef jackets on. I still have my white pants and my soccer shoes on. And he can't see because I'm behind the camera. I'm like, chef, such an honor. You know, working with Jean-Georges is one thing, but cooking for Alain Ducasse is like another thing. I'm like, my heart is outside of myself. So I'm like, chef, bonjour. You know, I'd like to cook for you. And he's like, yeah, of course. So I put together a menu, and like, he's sitting where you're sitting, like that close. Okay. Yeah. So the first course was, really stunning. So it's in this large bowl, deep bowl, and it was a sesame noodle dish. Or it was a takeoff of sesame noodles, but it was with a cashew sauce, right? So we took cashews, dressed them in noodles, put a sorbet on top of the noodles. It was a lime sorbet. And then on top of the bowl was this clear plank. And on the plank, it had like crystallized ginger. It had cashews, sugar snap peas, all these microgreens. And then table side, you take a back of a knife and you put the garnish into the noodles. So when you start the noodles, it's like the cold sorbet, and then sorbet melts, and then it's like a broth, right? So we served this to chef. There's literally no reaction. And I'm like, oh, God, here we go. So like then next thing I know, he turns to the corner of the wall because he's sitting at the end table to the right, and he starts writing down whatever. I have no clue. And I'm like, just, you know, yeah, exactly. you know what I wanted. I'm just like, okay, this is probably the worst meal. I'm just like beating myself down. Right. Next course, it's the jellyfish, right? So the jellyfish, it has a little cloche. We're a little fancy because it's a modern Chinese restaurant, right? And he, you know, we lift the cloche, we pour this chilled green apple tea, table side, freshly grated wasabi. Same thing, zero reaction, no emotion. I'm just like, okay.
Did he write in his notebook this time?
Yeah, same thing. Good. Notebook. I'm like, okay, my career is over. Okay, I'm going to get to the finale shortly. Thank you for your patience. Next dish is chili glazed frog legs with a shot of chilled pineapple juice and Thai chili. So, fancy French chef is, you know, taking frog legs, right? You know, sucking on the frog legs like chicken wings, right? And then shooting it, washing, you know, palate cleanser of chilled pineapple juice, right? And I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is like idiotic, right? I think he's just starting to warm up to me a little bit, right? Kind of, you can just see his shoulders locked down, right? None of this tension, right? Still takes notes, of course. And then it was this dish. Next thing I know, it's starting to get busy, and like orders are coming in left and right. Like it's getting busy, right? And I think at this point in time, we even had like Wiley, you know, Dufresne in the dining room. I think we even had the review of the New York Times. Oh, wow. Frank Bruni showed up from the New York Times, and I'm just like, okay, now I'm cooking. I'm trying to make, you know, impress Ducasse. Next dish, we had a halibut, Alaskan halibut, served with a black bean and olive tapenade, with vinegar noodles, agar noodles, which dissolved with this Chinese sausage broth. So you pour the sausage broth table side over the noodles, over the noodles, and they melt. So you get a little. So he has it, takes a bite, literally stands up and blows me a kiss. And then it's just like the weight of the world just relieved. And I'm like, okay, it's on. At this point in time, now we're getting hammered. It's a Sunday night. We're getting crushed. I didn't even have an opportunity to say goodbye to him.
You're not even working at this place. You're just cooking a stage. You're not a stage, but you just basically work.
No, this is Yum Cha.
Oh wait, I'm so confused.
Yeah.
I thought you left to the.
But this is pre.
Okay. Okay, I was like, how the hell did you pull this out?
This is pre. But I'm tying it back to Yum Cha, right? Okay. So long story short, Ducasse blows me a kiss. We get slammed. I didn't even say goodbye to him. Okay. Weeks later, this is the saving grace of the sweet story of Alain Ducasse. Okay, which is in my cookbook, Flavor Exposed. A couple, you know, I had a Hotmail account at this time, so that dates me, right? So it's like, Ducasse wants to meet you. And I think, I told my whole family, and I think my brother's just playing a joke on me. Didn't respond. A month later, goes by, urgent, second email, urgent, Ducasse wants to meet you.
So this is after you leave.
Now fast forward. I
made this impression on him.
I left Yum Cha. Yep. Okay, I'm probably at the lowest point in my life at this point in time for about couple months. I'm just like really down.
Yeah.
I go meet Ducasse. Okay, this is the day the Michelin star came out. You know, I show up to the restaurant. Okay, there's 3 chairs, almost like triangular, you know, positioned. I'm all the way to the left. There's a gentleman all the way to the opposite side of me, and then there's one set for Ducasse. Ducasse doesn't come in for about 20 minutes. I'm just sitting there chilling, talking to this guy. Ducasse comes in, shakes my hand. His phone rings. Literally just, this is day Michelin came out. I don't know what the heck happened. Just starts screaming, and I'm like scared. I'm like literally scared, right? And he slams his phone down, turns to me, looks at the gentleman's name was Hervé, looks at me again. He said, "I'll see you in France next week." Gets up and walks away. And I'm just like,
he said that I'll see you, meaning you in France next. Okay.
So I'm like,
no conversation happened.
Nope.
You just showed up. He told you that you're going to France.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It was just like a whirlwind. And then I just said, Hervé, I can't. I'm not going to France. So then the following month, I was in France. I was in Monaco at his restaurant, Louis the 15th. So every other month, I would go to France, and I would cook my food in his restaurant in Paris at Spoon. Hell. So it was a separate menu, and it was the theme of it was like American in Paris. So as I went through the thorns in the valley of death, I had this man who just saw me like, my cooking, my heart, right? And literally saved me from my own, a very dark place.
So he found out you were available, basically. He's like, there's this amazing chefs walking the streets right now, talent being wasted. Like, I'm going to recruit this guy for my restaurant in France.
I'm not even sure if he knew what happened.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it matters, but, and ever since then, there's just something, I just love this man. And to this day, if I ever need anything from him, anything, we'll get on a video chat.
Yeah.
He'll go out of his way for me. And I just genuinely care and love this man.
I love that. So now there's about like a 10-year period, maybe like 8 years from this point to where you open what I asked was your first restaurant.
Yes.
You were 37 years old.
Yes.
You also start getting a little bit of acclaim during this time, safe to say. So the next 8 years was a really momentous time for you. Is that safe?
It was. I did a lot of consulting for Steven Starr.
I saw his name on the list of people you worked with. So how long were you in France? Without getting into any detail.
Yeah.
Like, how long were you in France?
I like storytelling.
Well, no, I love it, but I want to make sure we get the big picture.
I would say over a year.
Over a year.
Yep.
What was next without getting into any detail?
Work with Steven Starr, opened up Budokan, played a supporting role with some of the dishes on Morimoto.
Okay.
In New York City.
Okay. How long? What was that period for? Like,
oh my Lord,
ballpark. A couple years, 1 year.
Yeah, a couple years.
Okay.
Maybe,
so now you're in your early 30s.
3 years. Yeah.
You open your first restaurant when you're 37, or your first restaurant that was like that. Yeah. Beyond what we already told us, your second restaurant, I guess.
And I was on America's Most Wanted for a little bit.
America's Most Wanted?
I'm just kidding. I was on Top Chef.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long? When were you starting to get headhunted to be featured on TV?
Wow, the date thing I got to work on a bit.
It was while you were with Steven Starr?
Yeah, after Steven Starr.
So early 30s.
Yeah, in
early
Top
30s.
Top Chef, they came to me a couple times, and I was just like, hey, because at this point in time, I had worked for, Jean-Georges for 4 years. I'd worked for Ducasse. I've had a good pedigree, and I wasn't, I knew I really wanted to go into that 3 Michelin star direction, right?
That was your goal to open.
That was my goal.
That you wanted to be the chef owner of a 3 Michelin star.
Or
Why
be the
did that
chef
matter
of.
To you?
It was just at the time it was just part of my existence.
What was part of your existence?
That goal is to be, it was just part of my pedigree. And
why do you think that's so important to people who get in this industry?
Yeah, I realize now, right, in my maturity of why it's important. And I think I need to be like very, very clear here. It's like, I have no interest in chasing awards. I really don't. I just believe be authentic, be innovative, and be daring, and make sure that it's sincere to you. Okay, so, but what I do, and then the caveat is this: I do love an organization like the Michelin Star and why that's important to me. It offers a level of accountability. I believe teams are successful, highly successful, when you have accountability.
So the star rating system offers a level of accountability to keep you, the restaurant owner, chef owner, accountable.
All of the above, the staff. And keeps it's almost like a guiding light. It becomes very black and white versus emotional. Like, these are our goals, these are our core values. There's no black, there's no gray area. It's just like, does this align with our vision? It's the same thing with Michelin. Like,
so it's a goal that is a clear line in the sand.
That's correct.
Is it because does the Michelin they offer? I mean, how much detail do they spell out what it takes to get a star? Like, is it? I know it covers like all the senses. It's service, it's food, it's ambiance, it's all these things. But was it the standards that they drew in the line that like this is considered a 3-star? Isn't 3-star like you have to plan a trip to go to that place? Isn't that the whole model?
Most definitely.
Yeah, like it's like this is the centerpiece of your trip.
Most definitely.
Plan a trip to go to this restaurant.
Well, I plan trips regardless of.
But
if
in terms of like the star rating, right? It has something to do
most
with,
definitely
like, getting
the 3.
in a car,
Exactly. That is correct.
Yeah,
that is correct.
So, I mean, I hear what you're saying. It's a definitive goal, but today you've shifted. The star isn't as important to you.
Well, the star is important for a different reason.
Why is it important to you?
I think when I was younger, right, I thought it was just, and I realized that it was totally unhealthy, right? It's like working in those environments and accepting the abuse. I realized that that's not healthy and that's toxic. So I don't want to convolute the story, but I've done a lot of self-transformation. About 9 years ago, I started that transformation. But now I look at the star as a means of, it's a second layer of accountability, right? It's to not only myself, but to the team, right? And I just love, I think, again, you have to have boundaries in an organization in order to create success, right? And that goes back to the initial structure, discipline, and love.
Yeah, gotcha. So during this time, you're very fixed on achieving this goal, a Michelin goal. That was on your radar. People are hitting you up to be featured on Top Chef.
That's right.
But you're ignoring it because that's not where you're trying to go.
Yeah, it's just not even part of my belief system, right? It's not part of my mantras or something that I even want to do. They were very, and I appreciate this in retrospect, they were very persistent. Very persistent. And
did they say how they found you and why they wanted you?
I don't recall.
Yeah.
I don't recall. I think they really wanted to, I don't know, if up the ante. And I think what I'm very competitive by nature, like from an athletic perspective. Like I like self-development and I like to grow as a human being. I always want to better myself. So I think that, the level of talent on the show was their pitch, and that really, I think, sealed the deal for me.
So you wanted to be associated with that talent?
Well, I wanted to be better.
Okay.
I want to be better. I'm literally a student. When you say, be open-minded, I'm very open-minded because I'm a student to this business, to this industry. I am a student.
So they were able to sell this idea of being on the show to you.
Yeah.
You bite. What were you doing during that time when you were featured on the show? Were you working in a restaurant?
So this is when I had my restaurant in New York City.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before you left and you went to, there's so many names. Alan?
After Alain Ducasse.
What was it? Yeah, and when you went to France.
Yep.
So this is before that.
No, it's after that.
Oh, after that.
Yep.
So you opened another restaurant in New York City.
That's correct.
Man, there's so many things that aren't on your timeline that are coming to. So like, you've been
a little mysterious.
So yeah, I know, I love it. So you come back to the States after a year in France. You open another restaurant.
So this is the order. So I opened. The opening and Top Chef. It was just like. Actually, I was on Top Chef first, so I came back from Europe. I was on Top Chef, okay, because I had just lull. I had time. So I'm like, okay, this all aligns perfectly. So I went on to Top Chef. And as I was on Top Chef, literally right before it aired, I'd opened, I guess you could say, I don't know, like a hot commodity. Like people wanted to work with me, right? And I had this a really incredible deal to open a restaurant in New York City on 47th and 10th, and we opened that. So as it was airing, right, I had
you could ride the wave.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did you do well on Top Chef?
I was that season. I was runner-up. I've been on 3 times.
Okay, cool.
I was runner-up. Yeah, I fell sick in Singapore.
So I mean, I know part of your story is all this success. All this. Well, you're getting a lot of accolades. You're opening restaurants. You're getting the media. Like you're living the dream. Like for a lot of young people who get into this industry, who think the goal is to become a TV personality and famous, right? Like you're on that path, right? Safe to say.
Yeah.
And then you eventually hit rock bottom.
Oh yeah.
That was about 6 years ago when you started to work on yourself.
Yeah. That was. It literally. It's like asteroids colliding, and there was just nothing. There was just dust.
But from the outside looking in, you're being featured on TV. Yep. You're on your way to open a Michelin star restaurant. Yep. You have all these people throwing money at you. They want to collaborate with you.
Right.
Like
that's right. So this is when I started shifting. This is when I started shifting, going from chef to understand. When I say businessman, it's not like I went to whatever, Harvard or Stanford.
Well, there's
or
knowing how to
MIT
cook, and there's
business.
knowing how to create a business around
Right.
knowing how to cook.
So this is when the shift happened, right? So let me just bullet this, right? So actually, let me finish my point. This is when the shift happened of me like, okay, I have to stop being naive. I have to really, because I believe the business sustains the creativity. The creativity sustains the business. They're right. It's not one or the other. Exactly.
There's balance.
So this has shifted my whole perspective. I really need to start taking this seriously because I'm working way too hard and just getting annihilated with all these legal suits and everything. So I had a restaurant in Vegas. So at this point in time, I was on Top Chef. I'm growing my restaurant group. I have at this point 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 restaurants at one time, right?
That are all like you're the chef owner of these restaurants.
That's correct, and
you
majority owner of the restaurant group.
And what year was that?
Oh my!
8 years ago?
I'm normally not bad at dates. You're just putting me on the spot.
No.
Yeah. So this happened.
This is before. You said 8 years ago. You had like this pivotal moment.
That's correct.
So
this is leading up to the 8 years.
2016 is at the peak of your.
That sounds about right.
Okay, where you had all these assets.
Yep.
So 2016 would have been 8 years ago. You're in your early 40s.
That's right.
So
a little bit earlier, in fact, probably 8 years. So at this point in time, when I had the restaurants in New York, is around 8+ years ago, right?
Okay. So from the time that you go to France and you come back, you scale to you open 6 restaurants, and that's about a 8-year period.
That seems pretty accurate.
Okay.
Yeah.
When did it really start to at what point did it start to scale for you where you were opening restaurants fast?
Right when I got off my second time of Top Chef, I was on the All Stars season 8, and then it just started exploding.
I think I just need to do a search. Season 8 Top Chef. What year was that?
Yeah, you're a stickler with the dates.
For me, it's just how it's how I bring it back.
No, it's so cool. It's so cool, right? So at this point in time, I have my restaurants in New York City. I'm on Top Chef season 8, the All Stars, and then I opened a restaurant. I did something a little bit daring and really. This was the transformation. I opened a restaurant in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And
so this is 2010 to 2011.
Okay.
After season 8, just for the record.
Okay. Thank you. I have
14 years ago.
Okay, 14 years ago.
Yeah.
That I was on season 8. Is that correct?
2000. It was 13 approximately years ago.
Okay.
So
this is thereafter.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you said it was 8 years ago where you kind of made the pivot.
That's right.
So there was basically a 5-year period where you scaled.
Okay. 5 years.
Yeah.
Perfect. So 5 years. Let me go back. I think it was 1, 2, 3. Well, we had 3 restaurants we owned, and then we also had consulting projects, and then we're opening the 4th in Las Vegas. Right.
Got it.
So there's a restaurant called Papi Den. I mean, I thought it was really beautiful. It was off the strip, right? And it was it was Asian food, right? Modern Asian. And, it was doing very well, right? It was doing very well for being off the strip, and obviously not the same critical mass and volume. And, definitely after 6 months, we noticed just looking at the books, right? So we weren't there every day. We had operators that ran it, and I lived in New York City. We just looked at the books, and it just looked really funny. The numbers were just not aligning, right? And at this point in time, my business partners, they used to consult for, eBay, Boeing, Apple. So they knew, Google, right? They know numbers, right? So they knew something was a little sketchy. Long story short is my partners at the time were embezzling money.
Oh.
Right? So, What
is the definition of embezzling money? What is that?
Well, they were
taking money off the top.
Yeah, they were hiding money and
laundering?
putting it. Was it
laundering?
Not laundering, hiding money or having fictional numbers on the P&L and essentially paying themselves out a little bit, distributing money for themselves.
Got it.
That wasn't a part of the agreement.
How many partners were involved?
1, 2, 3. So it was essentially 4 groups.
Okay.
So let's call it 4 individuals.
And were they all just investing partners or operating partners?
3 were and we weren't. Okay. So this is where it gets a little. That's an important point. 3 were, and my company was not investors. Right. We brought
the talent.
Right. And
operating partners.
That's correct.
Got it.
So long story, yeah. So what had happened was, I don't want to go too granular, if that's cool with you.
Yeah,
but I'll kind of tell you the lesson.
I understand that there's certain respects, certain people. It's a weird time. It's a hard conversation to have.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind going deep, just
whatever you're willing to share.
100%.
And if I push too much,
not at all.
Just tell me to stop.
Yeah. Don't worry, I won't kick you out of the house. So the restaurant, long story short, the restaurant ended up closing. Okay. And actually, we had to buy what was really messed up out of all of this. We had to buy them out. Okay.
So was it one concept that had 5 locations? You said the restaurant closed.
The one in Vegas.
Got it.
Yeah. So this is the part where the details are irrelevant, right? So we had to, regardless of that they were taking money, we had to buy them out. So I was in New York City, right? And I was going to get on the plane, right? And I call my partner and I'm just like, and this is where this is what I learned about. Remember I said I was being naive?
Yeah.
And I needed to learn, listen to my intuition. My intuition told me not to get on that plane and let the restaurant let's just file for, whether it's bankruptcy or just close it down, right? And my gut told me that, and I called my partner and I said, I can't get on this plane. And he's like, you're going to get on that plane. We need to save our restaurants, because if one closes, we don't want the others to close. So I'm just like, this just is not right. It doesn't feel right to me.
What didn't feel right specifically?
It just seemed like it was so dirty at this point in time.
Like, why do you want to save something that isn't that we got here in the first place? You're embezzling money. Did you know they were embezzling money?
At this point we did.
Yeah. Why do you want to continue?
It just seemed like a vortex of energy that I was going to suck up, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just like, this isn't right. But being responsible, right, and being ethical and integrous, which I believe that I was doing, I got on that plane and I went. I hate the word tried. I did my best to save the restaurant. It ended up closing. And through my own personal obligation, because I built relationships, with vendors, with people, with PR teams, with staff, we were unable to pay them. And I literally just dug into my own personal pocket, and maybe you could look at this as being, foolish and naive, but I just thought that was more important to honor them, right? So I literally liquidated all of my, whether it was 401 or stocks, just liquidated it all. And I just paid everybody. And I found myself, it just got worse thereafter. I found myself homeless.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so...
I mean, I'm thinking to myself, you own 5 restaurants at this point, right? So is that...
4, and then we had other consulting arrangements. So
I'm assuming you owned the assets, the value of the assets,
yeah.
and I'm assuming they're nice restaurants. So, I'm guessing you're going from being somebody who is responsible managing millions of dollars worth of assets, safe to say, to becoming homeless.
Most definitely. I think at that point in time, I want to say, in the number could be slightly out. It was over 10 million, in total.
Right. That's what I would assume.
So 10 to 15 million. So I found myself in 2 points, right? So the transformation happened, right, in this moment. So it's so ironic and so comical, I think, now. It's like I'm driving around in my Jaguar, right? And I'm going to Panda Express. Have you ever been to Panda Express?
I can't say, maybe once.
But you know how they have the compartments? Yeah. You could get the fried rice, orange chicken, exactly, and whatever, right? Yeah. Egg rolls, right? So they have the compartments, and I'm driving through Panda Express thinking about, let me just paint one more picture. So at this point in time, I'm being evicted from my apartment. They cut the electricity, right? There's times that I'd even climb in the back because it was open to the pool area, and I would get an extension cord from down below, and that's how I would charge my phone, right?
Yeah.
So I was in Panda Express, and I'm thinking about, there's 3 compartments. I have X amount of dollars. This is going to give me 3 days of meals, right? 3 days. So I go in the parking lot. I'm eating my whatever I order that day, my fried rice. The sun is setting. I'm in Panda Express in Las Vegas. It's going down. I'm just thinking to myself, why is this happening to me? Totally playing victim. I'm just this is just tragic. And on paper, how could this be? I was just all in my ego and just being very vulnerable. Not vulnerable, victimized. Went to bed, woke up the next day. I just felt like something just shifted. And I said, I was doing my meditation, and I said, of course me. I said, of course me. Like, yeah, I could handle this and I could do this. And literally in that day, I just got very real, and I made a commitment to myself that I'm going to stop with all the distractions and start living a life of purpose, right?
What were the distractions?
You know, whether that had been drinking, just going out and being, you know, like acting like an idiot, and just not keeping my eye on the prize of why I believe I was intended to be on this earth, right? So in this moment, which is just, again, it's very complex, but I had equity, of course, from my restaurants in New York City. But if you're a business owner, you know that you have to pay the business first, right, to make sure that we cover our expenses. So there's not every month I get a distribution. So I had to move back to New York City. I had to ask my partners to put me on payroll, and not make what I would normally make because I'm a partner as well. So I got a very humble wage, which I was very grateful for, and I worked on the line every day, you know, for, I don't remember how long, but probably over a year. And at the end of the night, as everybody would leave, I would leave with them, and I'd go back and I would sleep on the floor of my restaurant in the office where there's wood floors, and I would get the kitchen towels, use it as my pillow. I'd cover myself with an apron, and that's how I lived my life for some time.
So at what point, because you don't own those restaurants today. You don't own any restaurants. So at what point did you leave those restaurants?
Yeah, so after the restaurant in Vegas closed, I went back to New York City. And the timeline thing again.
I know.
A couple years after, I ended up selling my my shares and moving to California.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you opened your first restaurant in Phoenix in 2022.
That's correct.
Yeah.
If you say that date,
yeah.
then that's correct.
So it's been about 2 years since you've started. You kind of like restarted. So like, it sounds like you made this. I thought maybe you lost all of your restaurants, and that's when you kind of had this moment of like, it got so bad to the point where you were sleeping on the floor in your own restaurant. And then you kind of just folded it all in. But it sounds like you sold your shares.
Yeah, the tricky thing here was the restaurants it was our slow season, right? So we're paying more expenses than we are taking home a distribution. So there was no distributions for some time, right? So literally, and at that point I had liquidated everything. So whatever I was making from when I was cooking was the money I lived from. So I had to like scrape and grind and like.
And your partners are still the people that had taken the money and manipulated the so
different partners.
Different partners.
Total different partner group.
Okay,
yep.
Cool. So the partners that you had in Las Vegas were different partners than you had in New York.
That is correct. Yep.
Got it.
So years later, the partners in New York, I want to say 2 to 3 years later, I ended up selling my shares and really like getting clear on my life, right? So living a life of vision, of purpose, right? You know, getting back to like, you know, when I say I was burnt to dust, I literally was burnt to dust to like, you know, really just caring for myself, like, you know, meditating, going to therapy, going to like really dealing with things and looking at the ugly and really just making sure that I wasn't running from myself anymore. And really, because I have big dreams and I still have big dreams, right? Or I had big dreams and I still have big dreams, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't making the same mistakes.
It doesn't sound like you're running from yourself because you're running into all these opportunities. Like, it doesn't sound like you're like going into alcohol and these things to escape. Or were you escaping? Was it?
I think what I say running from myself is getting myself into bad partnerships.
Okay.
Right? Making sure that wasn't my common narrative. So I really wanted to disrupt what I felt was becoming a pattern, or more importantly, it was very painful. Like having nothing but, you know, people believing you have everything. So I had to really, you know, I ended up selling my shares. And more importantly, you know, I have a special needs child. His name is Jacob Elias, and I wanted to be closer to him. He lives in San Francisco, and I wanted to be closer to him. So it was such a massive shift of my life of what I prioritize, right? And more importantly, who I allow into that circle at this point in time.
Right. And I was kind of wondering if it was an issue with partnerships. I didn't want to come out and say it, but you know, knowing what you know now, hindsight being 2020, the business savviness you've garnered over time, reflecting back at those partnerships, the things you weren't doing that you should have been doing, the things that you can avoid other people from getting into the same issues. Hindsight being 2020, what were those things you could have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, just because somebody wants you, it's great to be wanted, but you have to want them too. But you also have to do your due diligence of who they are, right? I think for me, this might just sound really strange to you. I have always identified, like, especially like I told you, my mentors as father figures, right? And just because, a partner could be a husband and have a family, right? Maybe that doesn't make them necessarily a good person, right? So I was very naive in that sense. But I also think, do your due diligence, like, ask specific questions. If they want you to be a partner, ask for transparency with numbers and make sure, if you're going to get equity, 5% of zero is still zero. You know what I'm saying? So just know the numbers and think about, what's really important is know your exit strategy first and make sure that that's tightly knit and that you're protected in that exit strategy, and then you're able to. So whenever I get into a partnership, I think of all the reasons why I should not get into it first and foremost, and then if you make it past that filter, then we can move forward.
Okay, so in terms of a exit strategy, like what things should compete, what should be considered in an exit strategy? What does a good exit strategy look like?
That's great. I mean, you could go multiple. It's a multi-tiered answer, right? So in an exit strategy, even something simple as a lot of times when people get into legal suits is the legal fees in itself are just draining. You know what I'm saying? So make sure that that's coming from a company expense and that's not something that's on your onus, right?
Right.
And that's agreed upon in advance. If you're let go, for X period of time, make sure maybe there's some sort of tenure of payments thereafter, you part ways, yeah. Right? So examples like that, right?
In your previous partnerships, what were your lanes when the negotiations were first starting? Hey, we're going to hire you. You're going to be the operating partner. Were you strictly operating? Were you like the creative talent? Was that your lane, or did you have partners that were like front of house? Like,
yeah. So we had financial partners, like people who put money in, backers. We also had, people that oversaw the financials. So I think that's it's a great lesson. Just because if we're in a partnership and your strength is the finances, I still need to I just shouldn't turn a blind eye when it comes to the finances, right? Like having access to the bank accounts,
yeah,
right? Because I think too, people, just because they hear the word, oh, you're a partner or you have equity or sweat equity or profit sharings, well, what does that mean, right? It could be cut many multitudes of ways. Does that mean after? Does that mean net? Does that mean gross? Does that, just make sure, are you paid out after, your partner pays for his Ferrari? You know what I'm saying? So so be really specific. And I think I believe in partnerships that have full transparency, that there's, access to the bank accounts, right? And maybe not everybody has the access to withdraw, but you should have access of the transparency. So things like that, I think, are super
open
important.
book management.
That's right.
Yeah, at least at the partnership level.
That's right.
Right? At least at the partnership level. Right. So, so when you decide to, 6 to 8 years ago, you had kind of have this awakening, right? Where you're going to completely start from scratch. And that's kind of where we are today. So in 2022, you open your first restaurant. How much time elapsed from when you completely get out of your last 3 restaurants at this point of your story to opening your first restaurant in 2020?
So, when I moved to San Diego, I still owned the restaurants in New York City. It just took a long time to negotiate, as you could imagine.
I'm going to ask you a timeline question. When did you move to California?
So I want to say over 8 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So
2016.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually took a year off, and I just like meditated, and I got to meditated, spend time with I just really knew the focus. I don't know, ever since I was touched at a young age of a vision of becoming a chef and wanting to be a great chef and a great leader, more importantly, and a great human being, I just feel that I felt like this was my moment to just step back and reflect. So I wanted to reflect and make sure that if I'm going to go forward, I'm going to go forward with purpose. So I utilized that 1 year to really just get to know myself, right? And kind of go really, really deep and take responsibility. So maybe relationships I burnt in the past, whether, for example, like maybe with my ex-wife, like just call it, writing letters and spending time and reflecting and taking that responsibility for my actions, right? So just coming from a place of, not forfeiting, but really just honoring and respecting and having reverence for.
You got to slow down to speed up sometimes. I think you got to really slow down to get clarity, to reconnect to everything you were saying, but you can't, it's hard to do that when you're go, when the world around you, all of your mental bandwidth is being taken up, just get through the day. Like you really need to like be still so that mental bandwidth goes to like rebuilding like the neural pathways, like what's going on up here. You need to slow down for that sometimes.
Yeah, because in the doing you're doing, but in the reflecting you're receiving.
Okay.
Right.
So 8 years ago is when you move out here. You still own equity in the 3 restaurants in New York. That's how you're paying yourself.
That's correct. But at that point in time, so then, as I said, it took the negotiations of the closure of the termination of the partnership or the buyout took time, right? It took years, in fact. And then I was able to get that money and live off of.
Pre or post pandemic, did you get that money?
Pre.
So is that kind of what set you up to get through the pandemic?
That's correct.
All right. You have a partner today, and I'm assuming she works or no? Or like,
my wife?
Yeah.
Oh, she's exceptional.
Okay.
She owns her own, actually, the kitchen table that we're countertop. She does all the marbles and slabs and designs beautiful high-end homes of kitchens and bathrooms. And
it's always nice to have a partner who's doing well too. It makes life a little more secure,
Yeah.
So at what point do you start having the narrative with yourself, I want to open restaurants again?
Well, this was a blessing, right? So backtracking, when I was in New York City working with Steven Starr, I did some consulting work for Morimoto. At the time, the Morimoto's president of the company, him and I, we just had a great kinship. This was 18 years ago. And fast forwarding, coming out of, or slightly during and after the pandemic, an opportunity, his name is Mark. He consults for this investment firm, and they're like a magical investment firm, right? They're named Trinity Investments. They're out of Honolulu in LA, and they're looking. Mark was consulting for them, and they have a bunch of hotels. Essentially, coming out of COVID, they were taking these assets, distressed assets, and buying them, injecting them with cash, and revitalizing them, right? So they asked. At this point in time, Mark and I are new partners, right? And they asked us to create a concept, hence Tia Carmen. That was the birth of Tia Carmen.
Okay. So today, what would you say your strength is? Like, what is your unique selling proposition to partners?
What is my personal superhero power is leadership. I am all about culture. I'm a culture creator. I created an environment. It's really, first and foremost is how you show up is everything. Attitude is everything. But your job as a teammate, right? It's not an individual sport. It's a team sport. You have to protect the heartbeat. And by doing that, and I really generally mean this, if you're coming in with negativity or drama or toxicity, which is like quicksand, right? Then you have to take yourself out of the environment or we'll take you out. Meaning, if you show up with a negative attitude for the day, you can't work that day.
Well, you're going to skunk everybody around.
That's right. So I'm very protective and very kind of black. This is black and white. It's a non-negotiable.
Okay. I mean, I think what I like about your story and what I'm really interested in is that it seems like your strategy is in opening restaurants in hotels. So it seems like Mark is your strategic partner where they have the properties, they find the properties, the opportunities for you, and then you come in with your concepts and the solution with the restaurant. Like there's so many different business models of how to be successful. This isn't, I mean, I guess it would be fine casual dining where would you
it depends on the location. I think for Phoenix, right, Tia Carmen, I think is a little bit more elevated dining.
Okay.
Right. And what's really interesting are Kembara, our Asian street food restaurant. The check average is actually even higher than Tia Carmen when it's Asian street food.
Okay.
But I think they're elevated concepts. Yeah. Okay. In Trinity, essentially they own the Marriott in Desert Ridge, and then they own the Hyatt in Indian Wells, and they've asked Mark and I to go ahead and really infuse and bring life and elevate the Coachella Valley.
So does Mark work for Infinity, or he's your business partner?
My business partner.
And what's his title?
We're both co-owners.
But what are his lanes? If you're leadership.
Yeah. So I'm leadership, food, innovation, culture. He's really, one, he's obsessed with like wines and beverages, right?
Okay.
But then obviously the negotiation part.
Okay. Got it. And what's the name of your business that you guys own together?
Yeah, it's called SSC Hospitality.
Got it. And it's just the two of you
Yeah.
guys. So that you guys operate under SSC Hospitality, Sierra Charlie Hospitality, SSC. That is, you do business under that, and you develop concepts and go through, build the teams, and execute the concepts in these hotels.
Yep, and we work in tandem with Trinity Investments.
Well,
they're really like, when I say they're exceptional businessmen, they are. That is true. Greg Dickens specifically he is one of the co-owners of the company, Trinity. Just an exceptional human being. Just has that whole perfect balance of being business oriented, but really putting people first as well.
Okay, got it. So what do we need to know about your business approach?
Yeah, so I think, well, I don't think I know. So coming out of COVID, right, the instability of COVID, right, what I like is I really like these licensing deals, right? They're licensing deals where we concept it, we go in and we train the team, we work with the teams of the hotels, we bring in key employees, our key members of leadership, and then we work with the hotel, and it's a collaboration, right? Why I like these is one, I don't want to say they're economy proof, but they're, versus having a freestanding restaurant and owning it, right? There's a lot more stability. There's a lot more stability being in a hotel financially, right?
Why is that?
Because they have deeper pockets, deeper reserves, so they could weather a storm.
Right.
Two, you're able to, I love the leadership aspect, so I'm able to work with more people, right? To inspire more people, to elevate more people, and to see their lives translate. Because one of my mantras is what happens on the court, metaphorically meaning the restaurants, should happen off the court. One feeds. So for me, I just really want to inspire people to believe, what they don't normally believe, right?
I love that. So you are based in San Diego. You have currently the two restaurants in Phoenix, in the Marriott hotels. What is the challenge with that, being a leader and having to be remote sometimes? How do you overcome that challenge? Do you find it more difficult to lead when you're remote than when you're in the same four walls?
Yeah, I think we're in a day and age of, this is where technology comes into play, right? And you could connect with anybody, through, obviously in person is most powerful, but now through video, right? So there's multitudes of connections. So I really do make sure that I'm connected, right? I do the best that I can, I should say, right? Mm-hmm. So whether I'm there on property as much as I can now, with Indian Wells launch coming up, it's a little bit hairy now for me. So, texting, communicating, leaving voice messages, letting them know that I care about them, that I'm thinking about the team, right? So just doing the best that I can to stay engaged.
Well, when you opened in 2022, where were you spending most of your time?
In Phoenix.
That's what I would assume.
Yeah,
right.
In Phoenix.
So you spend the first couple of years building the team.
That's right.
Right. So how do you know you get a team to the point where you can start to find more balance?
So the question is how do I know when the team is
ready to go on their own and don't necessarily need you in the four walls?
That's a great question. You have to have discernment.
Okay.
There's no specific.
It's case by case.
It's case by case.
Meaning, when are my people ready?
Yeah. And then this is actually the most important point for me and this is why I'm very involved. It's not like a traditional hey, my contract says I'm there for 4 times a year and that's all that I'm there for. Like for me, I'm the type of leader is whatever it takes is whatever they need and whatever it takes, that's what I'm there for.
Okay.
Right? Because at the end of the day, your reflection is the most important thing and your reputation is important.
So in 2022, how long had it been since you had worked in a restaurant?
So you're looking at, it took time to build. So probably about 2.5 years.
And when you opened, did you have a network of people because I know a lot of people, especially someone like yourself who has deep networks. Mm-hmm. Did you have like a team that you had put together? Did you pull, what did that look like?
Yeah, we do have, I had a network and I have a network.
Yeah.
Luckily, I'm just somebody who just breathes life into people and who's in my circle now. That was also one of my lessons, is like audit, as we audit life, or we get audited, I should be auditing who's in my life and why they're in my life. And that doesn't mean that I'm better, or, they're, like, it's not that exchange. It's just like, where I'm going, are they aligned with where I'm going? And I could love them from afar, or they could have gotten me to where I am because of, essentially they're my teachers, right? So I'm very big into auditing.
Okay. So really just getting time to get to know the people and invest in the people, and weighing that human value.
That's right.
So once they've made your audit, right?
Yeah.
So in leadership, what are the challenges with building these layers between you and the work? Right. Not to say you're not working today, but you're doing work remotely. So you have to have those physical layers there on site. Yeah. So like, what do those layers look like?
Well, the layers begin with trust. I need to know that they're making decisions on what's best for the vision, right? And then me formulating the relationship with each individual, then it becomes personal. Mm-hmm. Like I know, like I make it personal.
How do you do that?
I let them know that I'm personable.
How do you do that?
I just be myself.
Yeah. So like you act the way you want them to act.
That's right.
Basically.
And
by becoming vulnerable, by talking.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Because at the end of the day, there's a personal connection, and then there's a vision. Mm-hmm. They're all just connected to each other, right? Because, you hear there's just nightmare stories of chefs, having licensing deals or management contracts, and they step away and they come back 6 months later, and then the menus change, without their, like the staff is, I believe in my heart that they have my best interests, and they know that I have my best interest for them, right?
So really break
their
down,
best interest.
What does like a licensing deal look like? Like if this is like what is that? Like, yeah, like what are the elements of that?
Complex. What are the elements?
Are you allowed to talk about those things? I don't like. I'm literally naive on this subject.
Okay.
So like, go ahead.
Ask maybe more specific. Like,
so like a licensing agreement. I'm assuming that you are. They have a license to use your intellectual property.
That's correct.
I.e., your branding, your menus, your recipes. Like it's kind of like a franchise, but a one-off deal.
That's correct.
So that's my understanding.
Hopefully not one-off.
Well, yeah, but like,
yeah.
You can use you're just basically using that concept, that brand in different hotel spaces, and they have currently 2 different concepts, and you're about to have a third concept, which will be 2 locations,
same hotel, 2 different locations.
Got it.
Our second Tia Carmen, and then Carmucha, which is our new global tapas.
Right. So I guess how do you even discover that as a possibility? Like, was this from your previous experience with the New York and Las Vegas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, licensing deals are advantageous for both parties, right? So, just think of us like as a menu, right? Okay. And if you're an owner, a hotelier, a business owner, and you could look at your a menu or a portfolio of concepts, and you could pick the concept that resonates with your vision and also to your demographic, right?
Okay.
So essentially, it's kind of like a stock value, right? So our restaurants in Phoenix are doing very well. The investment team, Trinity, has asked us to now go to Indian Wells and kind of disrupt the market and give it a little love and give it a little nourishing and really elevate from within, right? And complement currently what the current management is doing, right? And it's very collaborative, and you really have to be very communicative, and there's no sides, right? And really formulate the right path for each of the locations.
Yeah. I guess where I get a little blurry is like, where are the lines drawn on a licensing deal? Like, so like you own the intellectual property, the recipes, the branding, the like all the things that go into like we own, like we're licensing you this brand to execute.
Sure.
But in terms of like you said, leadership was one of your strong suits.
Sure.
Like, are you in charge of hiring the team that's going to work and execute your brand?
So we're in charge of hiring key employees. So that could be the GM, that could be the chef, that could be the AGM, and that could be the executive sous chef, right? And then essentially in these cases, the Marriott and Hyatt then would be responsible for running the day-to-day operation. So then we're at that point, then we become, of course we're involved, and I'm very involved, right? So we just make sure that they're meeting goals and standards and, standards of excellence, right? And we're on the right path to success. Right?
So your direct reports are the executive chefs, general managers, and then the AGM would obviously report to the GM.
That is correct. Yep.
But you basically get the key players in place, and then the hotel supplies your team.
That's correct.
With employees.
That's correct.
Interesting. Like, this is the kind of stuff, like, where were those lines? Like, I don't know what that looks like. So what else might be non-traditional in this type of relationship?
Yeah, and then I think what's unique is, one thing I will say, that those chefs out there that are doing licensing deals, we're in the business of relationships. You have to nurture these relationships.
I think all businesses are in the business of relationships.
100%. To this day, I send, the AGM of the hotel flowers on her birthday. Like doing things like this, like, just not because it sounds cool. It's because that's just who I am, and I want people to feel special around me. Because what we're doing is, so you have to enroll them as the teams from the hotel as well. You have to enroll them into the vision so that they protect it. And I know that we all come from different levels and elevations of experience. So part of that culture changing is also, how do we align on what our standards are, right? And if they're not there, how do we present it in a way that we can get them there? And they do believe it. So a lot of it is enrolling, right?
Mm-hmm. I had a question. I lost it because I wanted to listen to you. I'm sure it'll come back to me. So, man, so many different things. I'm just so curious about
so many different avenues.
I know, right? So you talk about the vision being really important. Like, what is the vision that you're sharing with your team to get them excited?
Yeah, love that. What is the vision? Yeah, it's such a powerful question. What is the vision? And we're knee deep in training right now. So, first and foremost, I believe just in talking with conviction, right? And I'm a firm believer. I like to sit down with almost as every single individual and get to know them, right? I think this is so important, because when you create this environment, again, I like to get personal, right? I think this is really important to create that culture, and through that, then we build. Then I find that more cases than not, then they really believe the vision that's intended for the concepts, right?
Got it.
So I get pretty personal and I speak with a lot of conviction and belief systems.
What are your belief systems?
What are my belief systems?
So when you say belief systems, I think core values.
Yeah.
Are you using that interchangeably, or?
I wish I had my core values that we
had. Oh, man, I really push hard, don't I, man?
Yeah, you're great. I love it. It's interesting. We have the restaurant's core values, which we went over last week, and then we have our kitchen core values.
Okay.
Right? And, right, I'm somebody, I believe a lot of leading with empathy and compassion, right? But within that gets back to the structure and discipline. It's people have to have a direction. They have to be able to see it. They have to be able to believe it, right? But we can meet people where they're at and call them forward, right?
Yeah. Well, I think about how we started this conversation talking about your aunt, Carmen, right? And you looked at her and you said, if this is what hospitality is all about, like, sign me up. But I feel like a lot of what you do today is an extension of the values that the woman she was, an homage to her. Is kind of what I hear. And what you're doing now with, like, extending those values to your team. One more question I do have, I'm curious about, in terms of, like, licensing and taking this approach. What kind of person do investors look for in licensing agreements? Do you think part of what they're licensing is obviously your talent, your history, your coming up in this world of fine dining, the mentors you had, they're paying for the ability to actually execute the job that you're being hired for. But what else is important in a licensing deal? I kind of want to just spell it out.
I don't know if it just pertains to a licensing deal. I think it has to do with fundamental relationships. I think treating people kindly,
right,
and being somebody that people want to be around, I think you're going to get more opportunities.
What about your personal brand? Do you have like is there a certain, like, appeal for a partner of yours to see you as somebody who's an influencer and to associate with that with like, oh, like this influencer. That he's done all these things. He has this lineage. He's executed these things. He's been on TV. Like we are working with that brand, and like that we're associating that with our hotel.
Yeah, but everything about life should be this way, right? Like who do you align with, right? What goes grows together. You know what I'm saying? It's of that premise. So, for me, it's 360 degrees. Who I am off the court, who I am on the court. I'm somebody who I'm huge into philanthropy. I'm huge into just kindness, right? And speaking life into people, because I was that child that nobody believed in and everybody said no. And my father told me that I was stupid and I acted stupid. So I know the power of the environment that's created, because it's an environment of nourishment, of sunlight, of watering. So I really believe in cultivating people that might not even have a belief system. Or I'll give you one example. I won't say where, but a project that I'm working on now, this young girl, a prep girl, okay, that cuts melons for this place, okay, hotel. I pulled her aside and I said, she asked me a question and I was like, why? She's like, she started tearing up and I'm like, why are you crying? She's like, I didn't know that I could ask you a question. I'm like, why wouldn't you be able to ask me a question? You could ask me anything. She's like, oh, well, my parents told me that I'm stupid. And I'm just like, I was just so taken aback by that. And when I got home, I ordered my cookbook, okay? I wrote a little note to her, and I gave it to her, and she was just so touched. But the moral of the story is, like, those are the type of people I gravitate towards, because that was the pain that I experienced, and it just pains me that somebody would say that. So I believe, I told her how I saw her, and what she should believe in
her image of herself.
Yeah.
I love that.
So it's really being a leader is quite a responsibility. It's right. It's leading not in the kitchen, but it's leading in their lives.
What did we talk about earlier? Paradigm shifts. Mm-hmm. Was that the words we used? Where you really challenge belief systems?
Yeah.
And I think that's what shattering belief systems. Yeah. And I think really that's what a leader is. It's saying like, here's what's possible, not just what's possible within the four walls for this business objectives, but what's possible for you. Like, I don't think young people are self-aware. You weren't self-aware. No. I wasn't self-aware. I think what helps give us self-awareness is the universe feeding us clues, people saying things to us like, you're really good at that. We don't really know we're good at it until other people see us for being good at it. So like you can literally shift people's potential by helping them see their own value, because you see them from a different perspective than they see themselves.
That's right.
It can be super powerful.
That's right. And being consistent within that.
Yeah.
Right. Because I believe I'm not sure if this is a real philosophy or theory, but I believe in the equal sign theory. However you're being, if you're on one side and the receiver's on the other side, however you're being, if you're consistently being kind, compassionate, loving, then that person will eventually become like that.
Yeah. People acclimate to each other for sure.
That's right.
I've really loved today's conversation. I'm looking at the time and I want to respect your time. We're over our agreed upon time.
I do want to say one thing
Please.
I just believe, and it just hit me right now, but I think it's really powerful, is like, I just believe in a non-cruelty environment. You know what I'm saying? Like holistically. Like I just believe that in my aura, and like whether it's an animal, a human being, whatever, it's something I want to abolish. Like, and I just believe in this, it's amazing how you could touch somebody if you're just being authentic to yourself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like where I was headed next, is like, if there's anything we haven't discussed yet, get it out now, but also like, where are we and what's the future of the industry? Like, how do we move into the future more intentionally? I think what I'm hearing from you is a less like echo that sentiment of like, was it cruelty free? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I did a post maybe 3 weeks ago. I'm sure you know the timeline on that. I'm just joking. And the question that I asked on social media was, can you be a great chef and be a great... Wait, how did I word this? Can you be a great chef? Are you considered a great chef if you have a toxic environment?
No, you can't be a great chef. A chef is more than cooking. It's leading it. It's so much more. And people, that's why I get so irritated when you see people online, or they decide they want to be a cook and they start referring to themselves as a chef. And it's just like, you have no idea what it takes to be a chef. Or you get hired as a cook and you tell people you're a chef. Like, a chef is like, there's so many layers to being a chef. It's recreating yourself in others,
I think, I agree. And I think being a great leader is also the things that are unseen, right? You don't even know that they're there.
Right. For sure. Yeah. I've really loved today's conversation, man.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions I wrap up every
100%.
chat with. So, what is one thing about your businesses, your values, a process, a system that's truly uncommon and makes you unstoppable?
I invest in being genuine, and I invest through that being genuine. I invest in generosity. What I'll say, and I won't go into too much detail here. I'll give you an example. One of my chefs is a single mother. She was paralyzed, in fact, about 1.5 years ago. And she's incredible. She's powerful. Again, a single mother. I opened up, I'm teaching her about business, right? And how to negotiate and right. Talking about finances, like let's get your son, your 6-year-old boy, an IRA, so that's something that I set up for them. So being all in,
Yeah. I love that, man. That's great. Great example too. The mission statement is to change the world through inspiring, empowering, and transforming the industry. So I think if we're going to achieve this, it's through helping one person transform at a time, right? So how have you personally transformed? Who are you today versus the man you were when you got started in this industry? How have you become better?
Yeah, and I love that. I love that statement that you're saying is because we all, I believe, have a social responsibility if we activate. And they're like we talked about Arizona, there's microclimates and microcosms, right? And I'm in charge of my own cosm, right? My own universe. And I just believe in the waterfall effect. So if I'm full, so I have a responsibility to the team and to the people that I lead. I need to make sure that I'm seen from a place of neutrality, that I'm seen from a place of kindness and love, compassion, and unwavering standards, that we never compromise the integrity of who we are.
So the answer, I think, would be that you've transformed in making sure you're giving to yourself first so you can overflow and give to others.
Yeah. I would say the transformation is dealing with my own demons.
Yeah.
And filling that vessel and void, or that vessel with love and compassion and humility.
I love that. The last question, man, we made it to the end, and it's a doozy, so get ready for it. If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants would be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom you could leave behind for the good of humanity and your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be? Think about your children. What would you want your children to know if they could only leave 3 things behind for them? It's a loaded question.
No, it's a beautiful question.
Thank you.
And I say this, it's something so simple. Well, actually, I'm going to say this. Let your yeses be yes and your no's be no. Okay.
1.
Say thank you and look somebody, thank you and you're welcome, and look them in the eyes and mean it.
2.
I think it's so beautiful and it's so precious.
Yeah.
And maybe even just put your hand over the heart and acknowledge that. And this is what I will say is people are a gift, and receive them that way.
3. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Angelo. And, this next question, I know that I said that was going to be the last question. We officially interviewed, or we officially wrapped up the interview, but this next part is really my North Star. I don't want to be the one to decide who should be made an example of in the industry. I really want to tap into veins like you, these networks, and find out who do you think has a story that needs to be told, somebody who needs to be made an example of, somebody, if the industry acted more like this person, the industry would be a better place. Who is that?
This one's so easy for me. So as I talk about Jean-Georges and all my mentors, Jean-Georges, Alain Ducasse, Christian Bertrand, there's one person that it took me a long time to realize he was a mentor, because I thought he was a friend, but then I realized he was my mentor and one of the key mentors. His name is Gregory Brainin. He is essentially the right hand of Jean-Georges. He's the essentially corporate chef of Jean-Georges restaurants. He is, I would say, the most creative chef that I know in the world, that I've experienced.
Gregory, look out, man. I'm coming after you.
Yeah, he's pure brilliant. He's just brilliant.
Where's he based right now?
In New York City.
All right, perfect. Look out, Gregory. I'm coming after you. I'd love to get you on the show. And how can we connect with you if we really enjoyed today's conversation? Maybe we're in the Phoenix area. Maybe we're in Palm Springs where you're opening your next 2 locations, correct?
That's right.
How can we connect? Maybe we want to come work with you or for you.
We'll keep you posted.
Okay.
I can't give away too much of the juice.
What about like social handles?
Yeah. So actually, let me look. Was it Chef? Hold on. I'm going to look right now. So Chef Angelo Sosa.
Okay. Angelo, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You were
amazing.
Thank you, dude. The pleasure is mine. There is no questioning. You are unstoppable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.